So it's such an honor to be the keynote speaker as we celebrate the Keturah Mental Health Awards. It's a moment that shines a light on healing, hope, and community. And first of all, let me just really apologize for you for not being with you in person. Unforeseen circumstances have arisen that mean that I cannot be there, but I really want to congratulate the nominees and winners for their impactful work in the mental health space. So when Arise and Shine, Heirs and Heart to Heart approached us, they shared their vision for this year's theme, fatherhood and mental health. As counselors and advocates in the mental health space, they were looking for an organization that walks alongside fathers, supporting them through the real challenges and joys of fatherhood, which I'm going to be sharing a little bit with you later in this talk. That's where our journey together began as Fathers Matter with the organizers. Our heart has always been to strengthen men and fathers, to help them rise, to heal, to shine as leaders in their homes and communities. So when Arise and Shine, Heirs and Heart to Heart reached out, it felt almost like a divine connection, a partnership born out of shared purpose and compassion. So we're deeply grateful to lend our voice and our work to this powerful collaboration. Together, we're not just raising awareness, we're creating a culture where men can open up, where fathers can find strength and vulnerability, and where families can truly thrive. So to the Keturah Mental Health Awards team, thank you again for giving space to these important conversations and for honoring those who make a difference. May this partnership continue to light the way for many others to follow. So I think I want to begin by sharing a little bit about my own fatherhood journey. Is that I was very fortunate. I have a father, had a father. My father passed about 12, 14 years ago, but was with me until he was in his mid-80s. And my mother and father were together. But my father was a very present presence in terms of the basics of what he understood as fatherhood. He was a great provider. I was very fortunate to get a great education, to never want materially. We were not hungry. We always had shelter, and many, many things that we as dads sort of understand as our role. But in terms of the times where I went through difficult issues or when really good things happened in my life, I can't remember my dad ever coming alongside and saying, I'm proud of you, or, what's going on at the moment, let's chat. So he was present in many ways, but he was absent in many other ways that in retrospect, I would truly have appreciated. And it was really only once we as Heartlines started this movement for Fathers Matter that I began to think back on my own dad and to understand as I become a father, and I am a father now, I'm very grateful to be father to two kids. One, Rebecca, is 24 and Lee is 21. But as you become a dad, I think one thinks a lot about what does it mean to be a father. And I looked back at my own father's story. And I am on one level sad that I never got his full story. And I would really suggest to you that if you have a father that is alive, that you have a relationship with, that you sit down and get their story. Because the small amount of my dad's story that I did get gave me some insight into his fathering and why he was the father that he was. And I think that he did the very best he could. You see, my dad's father was married 5 times. His last wife was 15 years younger than my father. And he was, although he was in his father's house, he was brought up by a woman who was a governess or whatever. This we're talking in the 1920s and before between my dad was born in 1923. And so it was a point where there were, the care for my father was outsourced. And I don't think he ever had a conversation with his father. And so his own father journey was not one that he could learn from. And so, he was a period of that time. And so my understanding of him gave me a sense of why he fathered the way he did. And it also showed me the areas that I wanted to father better. So when my children go through highs and lows, I try and be there for them. I try and do the basics, which is to provide where I can to give them a safe space. But I do go or try and go a little bit further, which is to come alongside them, to talk about their hopes and fears, to be with them through the tough times and be a support, and also to celebrate the good times. And obviously, as parents, we know that there are both of those. So that was my understanding of my dad and how that has impacted on my own father journey. And I talked a little bit about how Heartlines has taken up this issue of promoting the presence of men in the lives of children. And maybe I can reflect a little bit about what that journey has been and why Heartlines has embarked on this journey. About 6 years ago, we began to look at this theme of men's presence in the lives of children. And we realized, just based on our work over many years and our own experiences, that this issue of men's presence, of father presence, was one that seemed to either the lack of his presence or the destructive nature of his presence or the positive nature of his presence was very formative on our society. And so we began to, as we usually do, by saying we need to understand this better. This concept of, is men are not around because they're trash or they're deadbeat dads. The number of people we were aware of who were growing up without their fathers. We needed to find out why. And so we started on what became the largest study of its kind in South Africa. This is in 2019, to understand why men may not be present in the lives of children. And to give you an idea, it's estimated that around 60%, so 6 out of 10 children in South Africa are growing up without their biological father. They may be growing up with other men in their household, but they're growing up without their biological father being physically present in their lives. So we wanted to understand why is that happening. So first of all, we must understand that there's a context to this. I think I believe very strongly that the greatest devastation of apartheid and of our apartheid past was the breakup of families, of the separation of men from their families, often starting second families, etc. And so I think that's part of the reason why we sit with our current context. But also what came to light is that for men, a man myself, is it's deeply ingrained in us that our primary role in life is to, as dads, is to provide financially. And I know that was my dad's perception. He needed to provide for us a home, an education, etc. But in a context of a country where many people are unemployed or underemployed, many men do not feel that they can be fathers because they do not have money or are not earning enough money. And what is interesting is that this is not just the perception of fathers, it's also the perception of women. Is many women believe that is the father's role, that if he can't provide, then he can't be present. And one quote that I always reflect on was from a group that we ran where a woman said, if he can't bring money into this household, I don't need another child in this house. And so it's not just men that has this perception, it's men and women. And so number one is money. And feeding into this issue of money is, in some of our cultures, is the issue of bride price or lobola, or so-called damages. If a young woman gets pregnant and she's not married, then the family of the young woman gets paid. It's called inhlawulo in some cultures. But again, that is a money barrier. If there's no lobola, there's no inhlawulo, then the man can't be present. So there's a cultural overlay there. And then, as was in my father's case, there was what was skills. My dad had not been fathered to a point where don't think his dad ever sat down with him and talked about, his hopes, his fears, what he was going through. And so he didn't have the skills. And in that generation, I don't think there was much talk about being a dad. Then the other key issue is relationship between father and mother. I mean, we all know that the children can become a football, and the father can be kept away from the child because there is a conflict between the father and the mother, and the child becomes a weapon in between them. So relationships, money, skills, and then knowledge is that what we do know is that if I ask the question, are mothers important in children's lives? And I'm sure all of you would put up your hands and say absolutely. But if I honestly ask the question, are men, fathers, important in children's lives? I think the honest answer, based on people's experiences, is maybe. And I think the knowledge gap about why men are important is huge. And so let's just talk about why men are important. And when we talk about men, we don't just talk about fathers, we talk about men, because for many people growing up without fathers, the presence of an active and present man who cares at some point in their life, be a teacher, a youth worker, a grandfather, an uncle, makes all the difference. So Fathers Matter is actually promoting the active, so being actively present of men, not just fathers, in the lives of children, in order to benefit children, women, because men being more present benefits women because of the shared caregiving, and then fathers themselves. And if those of you that are fathers will understand that actually being a father is an incredible part of life that I would not swap for anything. It is something that is deeply important and fulfilling as a dad. So the evidence around this is quite clear. And a lot of us know this just from experience. Is, for instance, in America, and this pattern here in South Africa is similar, is that those growing up, adolescents growing up in father-absent homes are far more likely to be involved in crime of one sort or another. In fact, 90% of young adult men in American prisons come from father-absent families. And Khosiami, a Heartlines staff member who works in our prisons, our correctional services, he actually reflects exactly on that and says, I see that too in our correctional services. And we know that young boys who get involved in gangs, etc., they're looking for identity. They're looking for men who will come alongside them. Unfortunately, those men represent a value system that gets them into trouble. And so we know that men are more likely, young boys are more likely to end up in crime if they come from father-absent spaces or don't have positive male role models in their lives. So that is about being a perpetrator of violence. But we also know that girls that grow up in father-absent homes are much more likely to become victims of gender-based violence when they grow up. But they're also more likely to be victims of child abuse when they're smaller, as are boys actually. But the link between gender-based violence and men's presence is quite clear, is that if women grow up or young girls grow up, they're much more likely not to be victims of gender-based violence. The other thing is that they're less likely to get into relationships with men who are violent. So again, it's a huge protective factor. The other thing is that when men are present, children are much more likely to do better at school. When men are present in their lives, they're much more likely to be mentally stable, not have mental illness. When men are present in their lives, they're much more likely not to end up abusing substances. And when men are present, they're much more likely to end up with better economic circumstances. Now, it's important to say that this is not about the fact that single mothers don't do a great job, because we know many amazingly balanced children who come out of single family households. However, it is very clear that getting men more involved in our society is one of the key things that we can do for mental health, for crime, for our socioeconomic output, for women's health, for our own health, for looking at suicide, mental illness, etc. So this is not in any way to undermine the role of single mothers, but it is to say, if there was one thing that I would say after 30 years of this work, that in terms of social change, etc., that I would be saying, what is the one thing that South Africa could really focus on, is getting men to change our narrative, to become more positively and actively involved in the lives of children around them, not just their own children, but the children out there that really need them. So I really want to again thank the organizers for focusing on this, for the incredibly kind invitation to be there at these awards. Again, want to congratulate the nominees. I want to thank the Keturah Mental Health Awards team. Again, Arise and Shine Heirs and Heart to Heart for having approached us. And I really wish you well, and again apologize for not being there with you today, and really wish you an amazing event. So thank you, and have a wonderful event, and be part of this movement to get men to become more positively and actively involved in the lives of children. I thank you.